not acceptable to us. I beat him easily in the first debate, according to the polls that I've seen, but I beat him easily. I felt I beat him easily. I think he felt it too. He wouldn't answer any questions, and he had the protection of Chris Wallace all night long. I thought Chris Wallace was a disaster. But I beat him in the first debate. At the second debate, we have a never-Trumper as a host, but that's okay because I beat him in the second debate also. And but I'm not going to do a virtual debate.
The Commission on Presidential Debates calls for the next presidential debate to be held virtually, but there's just one little problem. The president says he won't be there. So what does this mean? Could this impact the candidates just ahead of the election? We'll break it all down. Plus, reaction continues to pour in following last night's vice presidential debate. Clear winner. And what does this mean for either campaign? And finally, the president returns to the negotiation table when it comes to COVID-19 relief funding. What does this mean for you and so much more in this edition of News On? Happy Thursday to you and welcome to News On. I'm Miranda. Thank you so much for joining us. The second presidential debate could be held virtually. I say could be because as of right now, the president says he's not going to participate. The decision comes after the Commission on Presidential Debates recommended this morning that the second presidential debate, again, be held virtually. The town hall style debate between Joe Biden and President Trump is set to take place October 15th, and it was supposed to be held in Miami. The president reacted to the announcement by saying this.
And that's not acceptable to us. I beat him easily in the first debate, according to the polls that I've seen, but I beat him easily. I felt I beat him easily. I think he felt it too. He wouldn't answer any questions, and he had the protection of Chris Wallace all night long. I thought Chris Wallace was a disaster. But I beat him in the first debate. At the second debate, we have a never-Trumper as a host, but that's okay because I beat him in the second debate also. And but I'm not going to do a virtual debate.
And the president's campaign reiterating that point with this statement saying that they would host a rally instead. The commission said its decision was made so that the two men would have to participate from separate locations in order to protect the health and safety of everyone involved. If the debate were to happen, because a lot can change in a few days, the town hall style meeting participants and the moderator would be located, as I mentioned, in Miami. But at this point, a second debate, again, seems very unlikely. As you just heard from the president, we'll have more reaction to this story coming up in just a bit when our bipartisan panel joins us live on the program. In other news, the first and only vice presidential debate of 2020 is in the books. This particular debate taking a much bigger role than in previous elections, given the health and ages of both presidential candidates, in particular as President Trump continues to recover from COVID-19. Here's a look at one of the key moments between vice presidential candidates Mike Pence and Kamala Harris.
So the fact that you continue to undermine public confidence in a vaccine, if the vaccine emerges during the Trump administration, I think is unconscionable. And Senator, I just ask you, stop playing politics with people's lives.
And the candidates pulling no punches on key issues like climate change, foreign relations, and health care, and of course, as you just heard, COVID-19. Here's a moment when Senator Harris trying to challenge the vice president on the administration's strategy going forward.
Well, the American people have witnessed what is the greatest failure of any presidential administration in the history of our country. And here are the facts. 210,000 dead people in our country in just the last several months. Over 7 million people who have contracted this disease.
The vice president, however, echoing President Donald Trump's narrative of success and personal responsibility.
The difference here is President Trump and I trust the American people to make choices in the best interest of their health. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris consistently talk about mandates, and not just mandates with the coronavirus, but a government takeover of health care, the Green New Deal, all government control. We're about freedom and respecting the freedom of the American people.
But in a race where the two oldest candidates in history are running at the top of the ticket, Neither Pence nor Harris appeared willing to articulate a plan for the transferring of power in case of presidential disability. And one of the most talked about issues in last night's debate was the economy and lead us out of the hole dug by the COVID-19 pandemic. Just the News correspondent Carrie Sheffield interviewed White House economist Joe LaGorna this morning and joins us now with more.
Hey there, Miranda. I want our viewers to know about an exclusive interview I had with the White House chief economist, Mr. Joe LaGorna. Go to our website on justthenews.com. You can see his take. He says that our economic recovery in terms of jobs growth is way ahead of schedule. Now, he's basing this based on the jobs report numbers that we saw last week that had an unemployment that dropped. The rate dropped to 7.9%. He said multiple reports, whether it was the Federal Reserve or multiple predicted double-digit unemployment, possibly into next year. And so he said we are ahead of schedule when it comes to the economic recovery. He also was looking at data, looking at forward-looking manufacturing plans, forward-looking purchasing planning for the next 6 months. And he says that in some key markets, for example, down in Texas, in Kansas City, and elsewhere throughout the country, that it looks like the most robust purchasing is been planned like he's never seen in the last 2 years. So while you heard last night at the vice presidential debate, there was claims by Kamala Harris that 1 out of every 5 small business is going to be shut down permanently. When you look at these numbers, it's telling a different story. Again, I encourage our viewers to go take a look at justthenews.com, check out this conversation with Joe LaGorna. He also said something interesting. He was looking at the jobs numbers again and how they have been revised upwards. Now, each week we see hundreds of thousands of jobless claims. But what people don't see in the media very often is that depending on how the economy is going, the Bureau of Labor Statistics might go back and revise upward and say, oh, we actually got it wrong. There are actually a lot more or a lot less jobs than we initially reported, because a lot of this is not an exact science in the moment. And it depends on the direction. If it's revised upwards, this means the economy is going very much in the right direction. And he noted that in this case, for the last 2 months, there's been an upward revision of 145,000 jobs. That means a lot of folks who are getting employed, who were not being reported in previous weeks. And again, that gives him more positive momentum looking forward. I also want to let your folks know.
Thank you so much, Carrie. We're running out of time. Still ahead on this edition of News On. The president says thanks, but no thanks to a second presidential debate. What this could mean for either candidate coming up. You're watching News On. morning. Welcome back to News On. I'm Miranda Khan with the news breaking this morning that the Commission on Presidential Debates will attempt to hold the next debate virtually. And President Trump's seemingly immediate response, it puts the second presidential debate basically in serious jeopardy. Joining us live today to break this decision down, what it means for the debate, the election, and so much more. We'd like to welcome in our panel. Joining us here in the studio, we have State Attorney for Palm Beach County, Florida, and a former member of the Florida Senate, Dave Ehrenberg. And joining us live from New York, Real America's Voice contributor, Dr. Tom Borelli. So let's start here. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us first off on News On. Pleasure to have you. So let's just start off here because I'm a little confused, and maybe one of you can break it down, and I'll start with you, Dave. I have this whole idea of this presidential debate commission is that they can make recommendations, but that both campaigns had to put their stamp of approval on it. This seemed to happen rather quickly this morning without much discussion with either campaign. How were they able to make this decision when the president immediately came out and said, absolutely not? He calls it a waste of time. How were they able to do this?
Well, I think when the president has an infectious disease, then difficult times call for unusual measures. And one way to protect everyone involved is to make sure that there is no chance to spread that disease. Now, the president has had it for we don't know how long because he won't divulge when he last tested negative, so we don't exactly know. I can tell you that I went through COVID, and it was no fun.
I know you did. I know you did.
No fun.
You're doing well.
Thank you. Yes, and it was in my system for a little bit over 3 weeks. And so they're trying to make a call when we don't know if the president will have it or not on that debate night.
Why not just do what we saw last night, though, with the vice presidential debate? Dr. Borelli, I do want to get you to weigh in, but why not just do what they did last night? They had the plexiglass, have them maybe 12 feet apart, have them never come into contact with one another. Wouldn't that ensure some kind of safety? It worked last night. Well, why would it work now? The doctor is saying he has a whole team of doctors saying that president isn't showing any symptoms right now.
Yeah, well, remember he had all the doctors sign a non-disclosure agreement, and the two who did not.
We don't know that.
Well, the reports are.
That is according to one report by NBC News that has not been verified.
Okay, well, NBC News has reported.
And according to HIPAA laws, they wouldn't be able to disclose that information anyway.
Right. Well, there are two doctors, according to NBC News, who refused to sign the NDA.
One source.
Okay, but it's not exactly.
But the doctors have already.
It's not exactly like Alex Jones. I mean, it's a legitimate source.
I understand the report you're saying, and Dr. Borelli, I'm just going to go ahead and have you weigh in. Basically, how is the commission, as you just heard me ask Dave here, how is the commission able to make this decision, and why not just have the candidates further apart? And the report that, and again, I'm asking a lot of questions here, but the report that Dave is referring to, NBC, saying that two of the president's doctors signed this non-disclosure agreement. The White House has not commented on that. One of the doctors did say no. It would be clear violation of HIPAA laws for people to communicate that. So in other words, we have one media outlet saying that this is what happened. I want to get your reaction to some of the comments that we just heard Dave say.
Well, Miranda, I think when you take just a big step back, this whole commission, I think, is really rigged against President Trump. First of all, the debate moderator, Steve Scully, of all the journalists we have in the United States, he just so happens to have been an intern for Joe Biden when he was a senator. And then I think Scully went on then to work for the late Senator Ted Kennedy. So of all the journalists out there, they find someone who's obviously partnered and part of the Democrat machine.
But Dr. Borelli, I hear what you're saying, and I do want to go to that, and you bring up a valid point. But going back to the original question, which is, how was the commission able to make this decision without approval from both campaigns, and also in reference to that NBC report that Dave just referenced? But I do want to go to what you're talking about, because I know a lot of people, especially on the right, are bringing up the background of this moderator. But first, I'd like you to answer that question.
Well, sure. Again, because it's rigged. They made a decision from on high without any communication with either one of the political parties. So apparently they feel empowered to do whatever they want, whenever they can. And with respect to the science, President Trump would not go on stage if he was tested positive. I believe the incubation period right now, since he's clearing the virus, is about 14 days. They could make that call. If for some reason he wasn't clear, they could just delay the original format another week. So again, again, just have to question the whole orientation of this commission. It's consistently Democrats and this commission are moving the goalpost. If they didn't like this setup, they should just say, okay, let's delay it for a few days. No, they changed the complete format unilaterally. That's not fair.
Let me ask you this, though, because a lot of people, who obviously support the president agree with his decision. But looking towards the polls, right? So Real Clear Politics had an average showing the president up, not the president, I'm sorry, Joe Biden, his challenger up, if you will, by 9 points. Some other polls showing him up as far as 16 points. So some people would argue that this could actually hurt the president. Again, just playing devil's advocate here as I am with both of you. Could this potentially be harmful to his campaign and his efforts to win this election, Dr. Borelli?
Well, I think at this point it would be more harmful for President Trump actually to participate in this sort of remote format because, again, the moderator, Mr. Scully, who was, again, an intern for Joe Biden, can literally pull the plug on the president. I mean, there's nothing more powerful than having two men on the stage going head-to-head on issues. What you don't want is the moderator playing God, in this case, a biased moderator, where you'd have complete control in terms of cutting off the president of the United States. That would work against the president. The president, like him or hate him, he is a leader. He's going to make those tough decisions.
All right, so clearly we want to focus on the moderator. Dr. Borelli does. But this is a hot button issue. Moderators have come under fire. Chris Wallace definitely was one of them, even by members of his own network, being called under fire for being, too lenient, if you will, towards Joe Biden, obviously the candidate that you're supporting right here. So, but let's go back to the point that Dr. Borelli is bringing up here. So Steve Scully, C-SPAN anchor, there are reports out there that he interned for Biden, worked for Ted Kennedy, both the Democrats. Does Dr. Borelli bring up a good point? Should this be someone who's moderating a debate? Does this come across the optics of it as being unbiased?
I don't think there's anyone who the president would want to moderate the debate who isn't like a Fox News Network host, or maybe he would like you, perhaps. But let me ask you
this, though. What if it was a Republican?
It was. Chris Wallace moderated the last debate.
But let's say works for a conservative-leaning channel, if you will. Doesn't necessarily mean that he himself is a conservative or can't be considered, unbiased. But going back, Steve Scully, let's say that he was, an intern for Vice President Mike Pence. Would you not be arguing that? Would your party not be arguing that?
It's like when I pick a jury. Well, as a prosecutor, when we pick juries, we know their backgrounds and we ask, can they be impartial?
Would that be a disqualification for you?
Not necessarily, because Megyn Kelly, who moderated a previous debate, she had her own leanings one way or the other. The question is, can you be neutral and can you be objective? And there's no one that the president is going to approve of. He's already attacking Chris Wallace, right? And so there's no one that he would accept. So you would be fine
with it. You would be fine if the situation were reversed. If the moderator for the second debate had worked under two Republicans, whether as an intern or a senator who was Republican, let's say Ted Cruz, you would have no problem with him.
Remember, it wasn't the Biden campaign who chose this moderator. This was chosen by this impartial committee. And we can all say, well, it's all a big conspiracy. The committee is biased and everyone's biased and everyone's out to get the president. And that's why the president is losing, because the public just wants to hear the facts and the truth. They don't want to hear all the spin.
So you have no problem with it?
I have no issue with it. I have no issue with it. As long as that person is a legitimate journalist. Look, if it was someone from one of your rival networks on the radical right, I would probably have a problem with it. But not for this person who's a legitimate journalist.
So, okay, there you have it. We are going to have to leave it right there. But both of you, gentlemen, please stick around. Again, we want to talk about the vice presidential debate, what impact that could have, because these are two of the oldest candidates running for the presidential office. We're going to get both of you to weigh in on that coming up and what impact that could have on the election. Again, you're watching News On. We have a lot more to discuss. Keep it right here. We're also going to hear from you when we share your voice. We're asking you, what do you think about this idea of a virtual debate? That is, if it actually happens. That remains to be seen. The president again saying, thanks, but no thanks. We'll be right back. You're watching News On. Welcome back to News On. I'm Miranda. Last night's vice presidential debate, by comparison to the presidential debate that happened last week, could be described as tepid, if you will. Both Vice President Mike Pence and California Senator Kamala Harris went heavy on policy talking points and largely stayed away from trading, personal attacks. As promised, our panel has graciously stuck around, so let's get right to this. So I want to ask you both. Let's start with you, Dave. What did you think overall? Just your general consensus of the debate.
Well, clearly the fly won the debate.
I love that.
The fly owned the internet.
It did. That's the most talked about, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah. So, it is actually nice in this very divided time of politics that we could all share a laugh, and that's good.
Yeah.
If you ask me how they did, I thought Senator Harris did well, and
And I expect you to say that.
But I'm going to be objective here.
Okay.
And I think that Mike Pence did fine as well. I don't think that this debate moved the needle either way. I think the reason why I think that Senator Harris had a better night, in addition to, I thought that putting Mike Pence on the spot for the 213,000 coronavirus deaths under his and President Trump's watch was important. And also, he didn't answer the question about how are you going to protect pre-existing conditions when you're in court right now trying to undo the Affordable Care Act and you have no plan. He said, we have a plan. We've been waiting 4 years for it. He has no plan. But aside from that, I think...
So are you saying this is a tie?
Well, I think ultimately because it does not move the needle, in that sense, it would be a tie. But I think Kamala Harris did better because of the reasons I just said. And also this, her goal in this was not to have any big home runs because they're ahead by, in many polls, double digits.
Do you believe those polls?
Yes, I do.
You do?
I do. Well, you said the real clear average is like 9.5. Yeah, I do believe that.
I do say that, but we also asked our viewers some questions when it comes to polling. And you know as well as I know, the 2016 polls.
The national polls were not that far off. Remember, Hillary Clinton had more.
There were two polls that actually called it for Trump.
Well, yes, right, but let me just finish that. Hillary Clinton had 3 million more votes in the popular vote than Donald Trump. The national polls reflected that. So the national polls were not that far off. The individual state polls leave something to be desired, but the national polls were not. So no, I do not disbelieve these national polls. So here's my final point.
Yeah.
I think that Kamala Harris had the better night because she did not have to swing for the fences. When you go in with a 10-ish point lead, you just need to hold serve, and she definitely did that.
Dr. Burley, I want you to weigh in. Were there any clear winners? You just heard what Dave had to say. What did you think?
Well, I'm sure it'll come to shock to both of you, but I think clearly Vice President Pence clearly won. I think Kamala Harris, I was really surprised at the number of questions she ducked. Right from the top, she was blasting away on the coronavirus response, but then she never answered the direct question about whether the Biden-Harris administration would go forward with a national lockdown and a national mask mandate. You have all these complaints, so when you have the ball, if you have the ball in January, what are you going to do? She did not answer that. And then the biggest one, obviously, is Biden, his campaign. Harris will not answer the packing the court question. It's a very simple question. If you have power, if you have the Senate, will you pack the court? They refuse to answer it, which means one thing. They will, because otherwise they would just deny it. Of course not. We're not going to change, 150 years of tradition of 9 Supreme Court justices? Of course we're not going to change the rules to increase our power. They can't say that because they're going to pack the court. And I think that is the most important thing that the American people really need to know. Because the Democrats are desperate. If you really look at their coalition, it's run by radical environmentalists now, and they're starting to lose the black vote. They're losing the Hispanic vote. They lost the blue-collar vote. So they're in a desperate gasp to change the rules of the game, get rid of the election rules, do mail-in voting, do everything you can to twist the election to their favor. But packing the court, I think, is the biggest issue. They can't answer that question.
And I want you to respond to that, Dave. But just real quickly, Dr. Borelli, going back to the point that Dave brought up, he didn't think that this moved the needle in either way, and he does put his faith in those poll numbers. Your thoughts? Do you feel the same way?
No, I think it did. I think it changed the momentum following the last debate because, Vice President Pence came off as strong, knowledgeable, foreign policy issues. I think it was an embarrassment to Biden for the fact that he would not vote. His vote was against getting bin Laden, and they let Baghdadi run around and increase ISIS, the size of the state of Pennsylvania. And they didn't get the other Soleimani, the Iranian terrorist, who killed who knows how many hundreds of Americans. So these are the facts that really I think came out, and I think it really had the potential to change the debate. And let's not forget that this isn't just a normal vice president debate. We have former Vice President Biden, who's going to be 78 years old if he gets elected. Kamala Harris will likely be president of the United States in the first term if they get it. That's why this debate was different.
Gentlemen, we are running out of time, but I think the most important question to ask you right now is, do you think, again, we were talking about this whole idea of a virtual presidential debate. Biden said he plans to be there. This could be interesting if the president's not there, how that could actually be a debate, if you will. But let me just ask you, what are the odds that we actually see a second presidential debate?
I think the odds are better than even, because the president will backtrack, as he often does, like when he said that the negotiations over the stimulus package are over, and then about 12 hours later said they're back on. So, yeah, if you're asking me if the president is going to remain consistent with what he said, well, then that's an easy answer. Generally, it passes prologue. The answer is we'll have a second debate.
We'll have a second debate. What say you, Dr. Borelli?
Yeah, I think overall, I think there will be a second debate, but it's not going to be a virtual one by any means, because again, that really twists it to the Democrat side. And by the way, the commission itself, they do have Republicans and Democrats, but the Republicans are anti-Trumpers with numerous anti-Trump statements. So the whole commission, in fact, is rigged by just looking at the comments of the people who are a part of it.
Well, then why agree to it, though? I mean, both campaigns have to kind of agree with it. If you have an issue with it, why bring it up now?
Well, I think the first issue with Chris Wallace was a fine choice, even though he turned out not to be a good moderator. But then again, all of a sudden, unilaterally, they're changing the rules of the game. Look, any sports fan would be going crazy if it's 2 strikes, you're out. This is what this debate commission's doing. They're trying to run it like a dictatorship, and it's not going to work. And the American people, if anything else, they care about fairness.
Yep. Well, Dr. Borelli, Dave, thank you so much. Okay. That was a good debate there. Always a pleasure. Hope to have you both back on again. All right. Of course, our network is called Real America's Voice, and that means we want to share your voice, as much as possible, because we work for you, and there's no better place to hear that than out there with the people. And our very own Heather Mullins did just that last night during the debate, visiting a watch party in New Hampshire at a restaurant, though. Again, want to bring this up, that Donald Trump Jr. held a rally there early this year. So I think it's fair to say that the vast majority of the people that you spoke with were probably in favor, I would assume, of Vice President Mike Pence. Correct, Heather?
That's correct, Miranda. So I was back at the Lobster Trap restaurant for the Trump victory debate viewing party. Unfortunately, we had some really, really heavy rains yesterday and some high winds, so that actually kept the crowd smaller than we originally expected. But we do know Don Jr. was out there just 2 weeks ago, and this same restaurant had lines of people wrapped around the building. This is the small town of North Conway, but hundreds and hundreds of people came out to hear Don Jr. speak there. I did actually have a chance to talk to that restaurant owner who's hosted several people for the campaign, including Eric Trump. So here's what he had to say.
There's no point in working a small business if you have socialists in charge of the country. So I feel like in order to stay in business, you got to support the people that are going to keep you in business.
So, Miranda, in 2016, Trump narrowly lost the election here in New Hampshire by only 2,736 votes. Now, some things have changed since then. We have a new New Hampshire GOP chair. We also have a presidential ticket for the Democrats that actually only placed 5th and 14th in the Democratic primary. So Joe Biden was 5th place, Kamala Harris 14th. So we could potentially see New Hampshire turn red.
We'll have to see what happens. I still have Dave Ehrenberg on the set with me, shaking his head.
No way.
We'll see what happens. Heather Mullins, thank you so much for that live report.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Miranda.
it. So speaking of high winds, Hurricane Delta is back over the Gulf and gaining in strength. When we come back, Weather Nation will break down the storm's latest track with a live report. Be sure and stick around. We'll be right back. Welcome back to News On. Warnings are now in effect for parts of Louisiana as Hurricane Delta looms over the Gulf Coast. The National Hurricane Center says Delta has re-strengthened to a Category 2 hurricane with sustained winds of 100 miles per hour. Hurricane warnings are now in effect from east of Sabine Pass to Morgan City in Louisiana and even parts of Mississippi. For a quick look at how things on the ground are shaping up, where the storm is expected to make landfall, we now want to bring it over to Weather Nation correspondent Ben McMillan, who joins us live in Louisiana. And Ben, we were just speaking moments before the break. One of the areas that could be hit that was already deeply impacted, we were both there on the ground, is Lake Charles, Louisiana. This is an area that was hit hard by Hurricane Laura. What can you tell us about the storm's path as far as when it's expected to hit and how much of a punch it's expected to pack?
Well, good day to you, Miranda. Good day to everyone else. Unfortunately, some bad news for Lake Charles and other parts of Louisiana. Anywhere from Lake Charles to Lafayette is in the danger zone. Is this hurricane potentially going to be a major hurricane that's Category 3 or higher, is going to move into the area here. And unfortunately, yesterday people were flying into the area. They said there's still blue tarps on a lot of the houses in places like Lake Charles. They haven't even recovered from Laura. So this is a tough situation, having another storm so close to that one on its heels coming into this part of the coast. We're here in Vermilion Bay. We'll give you a live look. Conditions not too bad here this morning, but we expect those to go downhill on Friday. And the timeline for you is the most dangerous time is going to be Friday evening, and we expect the storm to hit from Friday evening into Saturday morning. That's when we see the most dangerous winds and the most dangerous conditions out here in Louisiana. And Miranda, I think I just lost my IFB, so I'll have to toss it back to you, unfortunately.
All right. Thank you so much. Ben McMillan joining us live there in Louisiana with an update on Hurricane Delta. For more on the trajectory, let's send it over to Weather Nation.
Hey there, I'm meteorologist Rob Bradley with an update for you from Weather Nation on this Thursday. Heavy rain continues to impact portions of South Florida, already picking up between 3 to 5 inches of rain since Thursday evening. An additional 4 to 6 inches is possible over the next several days, thanks to a stalled frontal system and another front that's on the way. That's going to continue to bring in that chance for heavy showers and thunderstorms, mainly across southern but southeastern Florida over the next several days. Flood watches have been issued for St. Lucie County all the way down through Miami-Dade County, mostly along the coast, including the Turnpike and the I-95 corridor. We could see potentially up to 4 to 6 inches of rain in these areas through Sunday. And the frontal system, unfortunately, is just going to continue to bring those scattered showers and storms over portions of South Florida, mainly along and south of I-75 and then up and down the East Coast. There you can see those scattered thunderstorms into your Thursday afternoon, Thursday evening. Overnight, the showers died down a little bit, but pockets of heavy rain are still going to be possible. Heading back into Friday afternoon, more showers and thunderstorms, potentially each packing up to 2 to 3 inches of rain in some areas. And then getting into Saturday, the end of the weekend, we start to see more tropical moisture spill out over South Florida from an area of low pressure that could develop near the Yucatan. So that is going to continue to keep that heavy shower activity and those possibilities for very heavy rainfall around. Here you can see our accumulated rainfall map showing pockets of 4 to 6 inches of rain possible, much like the flood watch shows. We do want to talk about the tropics, though, because, Kara, that's where we're watching one area of low pressure that has a high chance to develop over the next 5 days.
Yep, and that's over the next 5 days, that high chance for development. But there's also a wave back here in the eastern Caribbean that's going to be moving towards the same area that has a low chance of development over the next 5 days. So potentially 2 spots to be watching, but the one that will at least be a little bit more impactful in the short term is this wave of low pressure system south of Jamaica. That is going to be moving out towards the Yucatan Peninsula, and this does have a high chance for development over the next 5 days. Unlikely to impact the U.S. in that time frame, but we will start to see some of that tropical moisture sneak its way up towards Florida. Rob showed that in the forecast earlier, but because we have this stalled front and this low pressure system starting to move up from the south, when you have those two things together, that does kind of help get some of that spin going, and that could lead to the chance for tropical development over the next couple of days. And then once this thing moves out into the Gulf, that's when we could start to see some of that heavier moisture make its way towards Florida. So this will be the thing that we are watching at least very closely over the next few days, but that second area of low pressure off to the east too, definitely something to watch. For October, this is a pretty typical area of development, so not a huge surprise, but it has of course been a very active season here for the Atlantic Basin. But if we do see some development here in the southern Caribbean, a most likely track for it to take would be to the north and then east, so we'll have to watch for any potential impacts to Florida, which does tend to be one of the places to see that.
Welcome back. Time for our favorite segment of the day, and that's when we get to hear from you, when we share your voice. That is something we aim to do every day here on News On. You can do that by joining our community platform, which you can find at americasvoice.news. You can also reach out to us on social media. We are all over the place. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Parler, CloudHub. I think I named them all. Oh, and LinkedIn. Be sure and find us there. So yesterday we asked you how significant the vice presidential debates is to you and why. If you're going to judge by some of the responses, not very that significant. We had a couple of you who responded by saying this. Steve Purser says not very significant unless one reveals some inside info or messes it up for themselves. I predict Pence will play down the virus and say how to save everyone by how Trump requested to take all the right medications to fight the virus and won. He finished his statement by saying this: he will use Trump's recovery as a victory to the virus. Thank you, Steve. We appreciate it. And Anthony Brennan on Facebook as well says, I think this is how most people will see it. Sleeping faces. Interesting. Thank you both. And drum roll, please. Our new question of the day is this. The second presidential debate, October 15th, between President Donald Trump and Joe Biden will be virtual due to COVID concerns. What do you think about the change and how could it impact the debate? Well, as we mentioned, the president flat out said he won't participate, calling it a waste of time. But there's still some predicting, as you heard from our panel, that the second debate will go on as scheduled. We'll have to see what happens. But all of you, a lot of you are responding to this, including Robert Marley, who says no way, on stage or not at all. And Mark also said, ain't happening virtually. Thank you both. And Rebel Alliance from Twitter found somewhat of a bright side of the debate being virtual. He says it will be way easier to mute the Orange Menace in a virtual format. Just saying. And Right Wing Rebel wants to know, is Sleepy Joe going to be fed the questions beforehand? Will he be reading his answers off a teleprompter? Thank you both. And Lorraine from Twitter doesn't seem very hopeful for the debate. She's expressed that, saying debate will be worthless, too easily manipulated. Christine from Twitter as well has a different concern than the debate being virtual. She said this: how about an unbiased moderator? Questions that aren't one-sided and calling out lies. Thank you so much. And finally, our last answer comes from John Sullivan from Twitter as well. He says this: what do I think? Joe Biden, chicken blank. But we already knew that. At Real Donald Trump, just do it all on Twitter. I won't mind at all. I've already figured both these guys out and know I'm going to vote Trump 2020. Thank you, John. And as always, thanks all of you for sharing your voice. It's always a pleasure to read all of your thoughts and opinions, and again, to share your voices. As always, you can find our question of the day on several of our social media platforms. There you can find me at Real Miranda Con. Just submit a video too. We love videos. You can private message me a video if you don't feel like posting it on our timeline. Again, we're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Parler, CloudHub, and LinkedIn, as well as our community platform. And don't forget to download our app. Coming up next here on News On, Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, they're all just around the corner, and like everything this year, things are going to be a little different, from trick-or-treating to stores being closed to giving Santa your wish list. A look at what you can expect next. And welcome back to News On. I'm Miranda Khan. An app that usually is done for trick-or-treaters can now be used for families looking for safer ways to celebrate Halloween. Can you believe it? It's just around the corner. Nextdoor's Treat Map has been up and running since, October 1st, just a few days ago. The app is often used to find out which homes are passing out candy and the haunted houses in the neighborhood. But this year's Nextdoor says it's added some new features for families looking to celebrate and yet still have that social distance. The map will now show which homes plan to display Halloween decorations. That way families can drive by and enjoy the spooky decor. Some homes will also participate in a costume wave parade. That's when you wave hi to your neighbors while wearing your favorite costume. And sticking with the holidays for just a minute, home retailer Williams-Sonoma says it's closing its stores on Thanksgiving. Don't freak out, just on Thanksgiving. It follows in the footsteps of other retailers like Best Buy, Dick's Sporting Goods, Target, and Walmart, who have already announced their plans. This comes as the coronavirus pandemic has changed how customers buy goods, shopping more online and fewer shopping in stores. Williams-Sonoma owns brands like Williams-Sonoma, Pottery Barn, and West Elm. I actually think that's a good thing, spend some time with your family during that time. Although after this pandemic, you might want to go out and shop. While we're talking about holidays, Christmas, why not tack one more store on for good measure? Why not? Because this year, Santa Claus will be practicing, you guessed it, social distancing. Brookfield Properties says it will have a touchless experience with Santa at 135 malls. Oof, that's going to be tough. That means no sitting on Santa's lap. Brookfield says to ensure safe fun, Santa might show up behind a giant picture frame, riding his sleigh, or in a giant snow globe. He'll also be wearing a mask in states that require it. For those families who don't want to go to the mall, Brookfield is offering virtual visits with Santa starting November 1st. Mall operator Priet is also offering Zoom visits with Santa. You might as well do that, right? And in this mall, Santa will sit behind a plexiglass barrier. The largest mall operator in the U.S., Simon Properties, said Santa will be visiting their malls this year, but declined to offer any specific details. I don't know about that. You might as well just do it virtual, right? It's so hard. Little kids just want to run up and they just want to hug Santa. Either that or scream and run away without a mask. So switching gears here just a bit, American poet Louise Gluck has won the 2020 Nobel Prize in Literature. The Swedish Academy announced that the win at a news conference in Stockholm today. The Yale professor has written a number of poetry collections, many dealing with the challenges of family life and aging. She won a Pulitzer Prize for her work in 1993 and was named the Poet of the U.S. a decade later. Gluck is the first female poet to win the Nobel Prize, not Peace Prize, but in literature since 1996, and the first American to win it since 2016. The prize comes with a cash award of about, how's this for pocket change? $1.1 million. Congrats. Due to the pandemic, the traditional award ceremony in Stockholm will be, as you might expect, virtual this year. And finally, here's a story that's sure to put a smile on your face, because we need that right now. And maybe just a face on your phone, because there is something hiding, in case you didn't notice, behind Apple's Mask Emoji. And it's a smile. Big shock. Apple has reportedly redesigned its mask-wearing emoji. You can see it right there. So there's the before, there's the after, according to the Emojipedia. It now matches its current smiling face emoji, right down to the identical eyebrows and, rosy cheeks. Before, the mask emoji had a more sad look. Apple has not said why it decided to go with a more cheerful design. The newer, happier mask-wearing emoji is expected to hit the public soon with Apple's iOS 14.2 release. 14.2, God, that's a mouthful, isn't it? And that will do it for this edition of News On Smiling. As always, you can follow us on social media and on our Join the Community page, which you can find on our website at americasvoice.news. You can also take us on the go, download our app. And as always, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow at noon Eastern. Have a great day.